Welcome everybody to the Going Beyond Reading webinar, hosted today by McGraw Hill and Kortext. We're looking to dive a little bit deeper into how we can drive outcomes and engagement with some of the teaching and learning solutions that some of our speakers are going to walk through today. Just wanted to quickly have an overview of the agenda for today. So I'm just going to quickly do some quick introductions. Then we're going to jump into a reflection on the recent student academic research done by Kortext and Wonky. And then we're going to get some shared experiences from our speakers at Westminster University and Middlesex. We're going to wrap up then with a quick Q&A. So if there's any questions that you have for the speakers, please put them into the chat or into the Q&A section on here. And then we'll wrap up for the day there. But first off, quickly, just a quick introduction about McGraw Hill and Kortext. So we have just recently kicked off this partnership to start to help to drive more engagement and usage of not only the ebooks, but some of the wider teaching learning resources that McGraw has to offer. These resources, you'll get some examples today from the sciences, but we actually host a range of resources across the spectrum to support a number of different types of students at your universities. McGraw Hill is known for about 130 years of providing trusted and tested content. Over the last 10-15 years, we've been focusing on delivering learning solutions and technology into the market in partnership with universities. So making sure that we are able to customize and deliver resources that really support the teaching learning experience of today's student. And I'll hand it over to Robin Gibson from Kortext to quickly introduce Kortext.
Okay, thank you, Robin. Appreciate that. Yeah, I mean, Kortext is the platform. McGraw Hill is one of the major publishers that sits on our platform. Ultimately, we're the UK's #1 learning experience and engagement platform. I think we are in now 130 plus universities and growing all the time. We do have 2 million digital textbooks on our platform from 4,699 other publishers alongside McGraw Hill, with McGraw Hill being one of our most important, obviously. Our mission really is to support you at the universities in your mission to educate the next generation of difference makers. And it's as simple as that. And obviously that leads into the student experience and digitization, etc. So excited to be talking to you all today.
And just wrap up that, and we will jump into Robin Gibson. He's going to go into the reflections and of the recent study for students and academic research.
Yeah, thank you, Robin. So just looking, if you go to the next slide. So just we, over the last 12 months, have been involved in a number of research studies, but also looking at other research that's come out as well. So I'm just going to reflect on 2 or 3 things today. So we have partnered with Wonky over the last 12 months and have run 2 quite extensive research studies, one with university leaders at Pro-VC, DVC level, education level, and the other one with academics themselves, and got considerable sort of quorum in terms of answering those. I think coming out of those studies, one of the overwhelming feelings is of paramount importance is the student experience. And we're obviously going to touch on that today with some of the examples we've got from our guest speakers. But what currently is the student experience? Well, I think there are 2 or 3 things that are really coming through. And I'm calling on advanced HE and HEPI student academic experience here as well. Just to say that, number one, obviously across the country, there is financial struggles, cost of living crisis, but that specifically relates to students who have never been that well off, most of them, and now even more so when the cost of accommodation, the cost of the basics are going through the roof, then they are struggling financially. How does that relate to their engagement in learning materials? Well, fundamentally, if universities aren't providing those learning materials, then anything from £200 a year to £800 a year, depending on the study, is the cost of textbooks to that student. And how can they actually afford to make that investment to, in the first place, have those learning materials and not be in the queue for those 3 books that the library actually have got. Luckily today we partner with both Westminster and Middlesex, who do provide those electronic learning materials for free. So, you know, we've got some good examples of what can be done from a university perspective. Secondly, once they can access the learning materials, their workloads are increasing dramatically. Again, from the Advanced HE study, since 2017, summative assessments per term have gone up from 5 to 6.7. So there's which really then relates to the third one as well, is that mental health is becoming a real issue within the sector. So what can be done to sort of mitigate that workload, not necessarily reduce the workload, but again, from a provider of learning resources and a platform that provides those learning resources, then, you know, really properly engaging with those makes a big difference to the student based on the amount of work they can do and the amount of time saving they've got. And then from a mental health standpoint, obviously anything that can be done to mitigate against mental health issues will be a positive, because as we know, probably the last thing she did was Michelle Dolan appointed Edward Peck as the colloquialism student mental health champion, and with a real message that you know, a falling engagement is a sign of mental health issues, so we really need to continue to keep that engagement up, which will help mitigate against mental health issues. And what are the initiatives that could be done for that? So what does that mean from a academic and a teaching standpoint? So from the academic survey we very recently unveiled at the end of last month, we can see that the adoption of digital technology, a key challenge highlighted by academics. And as I talk to academics, there is obviously a plethora of platforms out there that has been thrown at you every day. And it's really a case of what works for you, and almost does the choice of teaching text does it become influenced by what a platform can do? And probably that we will see that. And, you know, platforms like McGraw-Hill platform can obviously really start to help with teaching and learning and student engagement. Therefore, you know, does the McGraw-Hill text get better favor than another text from another publisher? But that adoption of digital technology is a key challenge highlighted by academics. But if we just go to the next slide a second. And actually onto the next one, I go to the next one. But obviously there's a lot of digital out there, but I thought this is a great quote that came through the research, which we need to ensure that we do not just create a repository of digital resources that students do not engage with, and that we encourage use of collaborative note-taking, personal note-taking, question answers on a range of digital media. And I think that's really what this is about today, is the digital resources are there. Probably in the next 5 years, a little bit like the shift from music, from CDs to digital music, that will happen in higher education. We will look back and fondly on the physical book. It will be the digital book, but the key challenge is how we get students to engage with that digital media and to make the most of the digital media, and therefore to mitigate against some of those other student engagement challenges and student experience challenges that were highlighted from the other bit of the research. So again, we work with both Middlesex, we work with Westminster extensively, and I'd just like to start by handing over to Dr. Joan Liu, who's going to take you through from a Westminster perspective how she gets that engagement by the use of digital resources in her teaching.
Thank you, Robin. Over to you, Dr. Liu.
Well, thank you very much for the introduction. I'm just going to share my slides and hopefully you'll be able to see them very shortly. Okay, and I'm just going to present it into presenter mode. Yes, and Robin, I hope you can see the slides.
Yes, that's good. Thank you.
Perfect. Excellent. Well, thank you so much to the McGraw-Hill Education team for inviting me to speak in this webinar today. It's a real delight, really, to have the opportunity to share how I've incorporated McGraw-Hill Smartbook and education tools to my module to enhance students' engagement and also their learning experience. I lead a large first-year undergraduate anatomy module at the School of Life Sciences, University of Westminster. And on the module in 2016, we had approximately 200 first-year undergrads. And fortunately, or unfortunately, the student numbers have increased tremendously in the subsequent years. And now we have over 460 students on our module. Most of our students are studying towards a bachelor in science, in biomedical science, or medical science. The increase in student numbers is definitely one of the motivation behind why we start sorting and investing in digital education tools for our students. Another important driver is the need to be able to offer our students a really good resource that's both informative, engaging, and flexible to enhance and support students' learning, and also motivate them to explore content outside of the taught material. And we found the book Human Anatomy by Kenneth Selden to be excellent, and the digital education package that's offered alongside the book to be fantastic for our students. Our students on our anatomy module all have access to the book Human Anatomy as a Smartbook, which they can easily access through a Connect account. And this is an account which they can create themselves before or at the start of the module. And then through this Connect account, they can access other packages, including Anatomy and Physiology Review, APR for short, which is a virtual cadaver dissection atlas, and also a practice atlas, which has anatomy and anatomical models to help students learn and practice labeling anatomical structures of the body. I think a really outstanding aspect of this educational tool is the ability for teaching academics to set up reading assignments and APR and practice atlas tests for the students in Connect. So students can then focus their attention on specific topic one at a time, and then explore other related structures in their own time. And of course, to help encourage students to do those assessments, we use to incorporate different McGraw Hill education tools into our teaching sessions, so in our lectures and tutorials. And we offer assignments as summative. So each assignment basically contributes to the coursework mark. Another really good aspect of Connect is that the teaching academics can look at the module statistic report in Connect and see how the students actually perform on the assignment and identify any students that are not engaging with the material. And there's an option to send an email to the students as a reminder if they're not engaging with the work, if they haven't created an account yet, for example. So more on how we actually use the Smartbook and Anatomy and Physiology Reviewed practice atlas in our teaching sessions and also coursework assessment. So students can access the book Human Anatomy as an ebook, so they can flick through the pages themselves. But what we found really useful is to set pre-reading, so reading before lectures in the form of reading assignments. And in the reading assignments, the teaching academics have the option to highlight text of interest in yellow here for the students. And then the students can then attempt the MCQ associated with the readings to gain marks towards their coursework. And to access these MCQ questions, it's really easy. The students just need to click on the question icon at the bottom of the page. And the students will then go through a number of MCQs to ensure they understand each concept. And then they can also indicate their level of confidence when answering each question. And this is quite important because at the end of the MCQs, the students actually receive a personalized analytic report on their performance. So information on which concepts needs more work, which concept they did really well, which concept they were least confident in, which concepts they were really performing really well and have really good confidence in. Another useful aspects of the Smartbook is that it's associated with banks of auto-mark questions that can be auto-marked. And this should be appealing to all academics here. And these banks of questions are actually different to those questions that are associated with the reading, but are still linked with the content of the book. And these questions are interactive and great graphics, and they have different question formats. So you have click and drag, fill in the blanks, matching, ranking. And I use them in my tutorial assignments for students because they're informative, they're simple enough to complete within the tutorial session itself. So the students don't actually need to wait until the near due date, coursework due date, to complete everything at once. And this year, I've actually customized and create my own auto-mark questions to include in the tutorial assignments. So this is very good for us. And in terms of APR, so in Anatomy and Physiology Reviewed, we do use this cadaver atlas quite a lot in our tutorial sessions to ensure the students are aware that this tool is available for them to use, and to actually teach them how to use it, because without this, they wouldn't know and how to access it, and they won't, some of them may not be maybe interested or adventurous enough to look at this platform unless we introduce it some way in our teaching. So in previous years, we also have a group of students from our previous cohort to act as near peers instructors to teach the current cohort how to best use these tools for their learnings, and give great tips and advice on good learning practice from a more student perspective. And a number of our near peer instructors are also McGraw Hill student ambassadors as well. And just more information about what exactly is APR. So it's a 2D and 3D virtual cadaver dissection atlas. And in our tutorials, the students are asked to select anatomical regions of their interest. And then a list of structures will appear on the left side. And the students then click on each structure and then see where it's located in the cadaver graphic. And you can see it in green here at the bottom image. And otherwise, they can actually choose to highlight or select a layer with pins. So that's the middle image there. And then they scroll their arrows over each pin to know the names of each structure. But it's not only the name that appears, they can also click on it to it. And then this is accompanied by a brief description of the bone or the structure, the location, and sometimes the function as well. And what a really good aspect is that it has a speaking icon in the description. So the students can learn how to pronounce the word of each of the structures or bone, for example. And in other cadaver images, the students can actually peel the cadaver from superior to deep to learn the positioning of organs within certain cavities, for example. And in 3D models, so that's the last image at the bottom there, the students can actually rotate the virtual cadaver 360 degrees, and then choose to see or expose the skeleton, nervous, muscular, vascular structures behind. If you look at the top of the page, all the icons there, there's the option to look at other interesting images as well from different radiological techniques, so X-rays or EMs, histological stain images, for example, which are quite useful. And there's also possible to access practice atlas from the APR platform, and there's also a quiz module for the students to actually just test their knowledge from going through the APR. And I tend to actually set APR tests for the students to do so they can focus on one region per tutorial. And just moving quickly to Practice Atlas, it's quite an interesting tool. It helps students to learn specific names on anatomical structures using anatomical models. And I tend to demonstrate the use of these tools in didactic lectures, really to break up the teaching a little bit, and then ask the students to really think about, well, which labels go in which box, and then actually demonstrate dragging the labels into the box and then checking the answers for the students. And then I set formative activities for the students to do on Practice Atlas for them to practice in their own time. So what are the outcomes of incorporating McGraw Hill's education tools into our module, and how that have actually affect our kind of module performance? I've looked at the data from our module from 2016 to 2020, the 2021 to 22 data is actually being prepared at the moment because we're just finishing the academic year. 2016 and to 2018 are the years which we have yet to fully adopt McGraw-Hill tools into our teaching and assessment. And then from 2019 and 2022 is when we use McGraw-Hill quite intensively in our teaching and assessment. And it comes as no surprise because those 2 years are, of course, the years where we are all locked down due to the COVID pandemic, and all the teaching and assessments were really done online. What we found is the percentage of students that passed the module were quite similar in 2016 up to 2020. So even when we move our studies or teaching online, the pass rate hasn't dropped. So all the teaching and assessment have maintained really, and students are still learning. So that's really good. And just showing the coursework mark in different years, what you can see is that, the median, which is the middle inside these box and whiskers of the coursework, were actually much higher in 2019-20 when we implement or adopt McGraw-Hill tools and Smartbook fully in our module compared to 2016 up to 2018, when that integration hasn't been fully implemented just yet. And this is very, very great results. And, what do students think about McGraw-Hill tools? And we've looked at our annual students module evaluation. And if you can see on the graph here, the points in blue is the students' rating in 2018. And all the points that's in kind of orange, light orange to very dark orange are in 2019, 20, and 21. And what you can see here that the module satisfaction rating have really increased from 2018 to 2019, 20, and 21. Okay. And then when we looked at each of the questions that's on the questionnaire that the students have in response to teaching, that have increased, especially when we ask questions about IT. And even when we ask questions about whether online learning we're able to provide adequate replacement for face-to-face learning, the ratings were still very, very high in the high 80s as well. And then looking at assessment, that was an interesting question, whether the criteria used in marking was made clear to the students, and the student felt that prior to 2019 that wasn't very clear, so that was a bit lower, whereas after 2019 that was up in the high 80s as well. So that's really, really excellent. And I've included some comments that students have provided on their evaluation about McGraw-Hill. For example, reading informative resources provided for McGraw-Hills are of great help. And I think in terms of resources, this module has done its best in comparison to other modules we have had, which is excellent for a module and also for McGraw-Hill. So I'll just end this presentation by perhaps highlighting some of the benefits of using the Smartbook, Connect, and the other digital tools of McGraw-Hill. And the tools itself really integrate quite well with our virtual learning environment, so Blackboard. And when it was upgraded to Blackboard Ultra, that didn't have any problems, interruption at all. The banks of automark questions were really, really useful. So I don't have to keep thinking about, new questions to put in. And because there's graphics involved and there's different format of it, it makes it a bit more interesting for the students so that we can incorporate into our tutorials. There's a Read Everywhere app that's associated with the Smartbook. So students can download a chapter of the McGraw-Hill Human Skeleton book and then read it on the train or when they're commuting, and they don't internet for that, I don't believe. And the Connect system, once linked to the Blackboard site, are really easy for grade to be transferred. So assignment that's done on Connect can then directly be transferred to Gradebook in Blackboard Ultra. We can also manage initial extension for students who have reasonable adjustment. It really is quite easy to share with colleagues when they do want to mark some of the manually marked questions. And finally, I want to say a special thank you to David Zalby and also Kenneth O'Connor from McGraw Hill. They have been excellent support from them. Any questions I have, any problems, all I have to do is just email, and they provide really prompt feedback. And I think that's just excellent support. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Lee. Thank you for sharing all that great feedback, and well done to the team for the support. But wonderful to hear about all the great student feedback that you're getting, and as well as the impact that it's having on the performance on their course. I would like to now hand it over to Dr. Roberts from the Faculty of Science and Technology Foundation Program at Middlesex. She leads on modules related to life sciences, anatomy, and physiology, as well as Yvonne. He's a senior graduate academic assistant at Middlesex. He facilitates sessions, organizes and leads various student support sessions, develops interactive learning sessions, as well as provides formative assessment feedback. Today, they're going to share how they are currently using some of the readings from the Kortext platform, along with McGraw Hill's A&P digital solutions throughout the module, and how this is impacting the final assessment feedback from students. So without further ado, I will hand it over to you.
Thank you very much, Robin, and thank you, Joan, for your lovely presentation. It was really nice to hear how someone else at another university uses the platform. I'll just share my screen. Yeah. Hopefully you can all see my slides. Yeah.
Yes, you're good.
So thank you for the introduction. I'm going to start telling you about a case study at Middlesex University, and then hand you over to Yvonne, who's going to tell you about how we use the platform more in other modules. So I am the Foundation Year Science Programme Lead and teach on a number of modules in biomedical science, so things like anatomy and physiology, molecular biology and genomics. Ivan is a senior graduate academic assistant, so he supports in learning mainly in the biomedical sciences area. So as Robin was saying earlier, being able to engage students really is a challenge for us. And I think although we might think that we are engaging students, this might not always be the case. And so at Middlesex, we really are trying to achieve effective student engagement and also ensure that students achieve what we want to achieve and get good grades as well. So I'm going to tell you today about, again, an anatomy and physiology module, so similar to Joan. It's a first year anatomy and physiology module. It's a very large module, so we have normally about 200 students on it. It's a very, very diverse subject area. And what we were finding is that students were struggling because it was such a diverse area. So each week the students would learn about a new body system, so digestive system, musculoskeletal system, and so it really is a lot of work for the students to take on. So this could be due to the fact that students weren't engaging with the curriculum, that they weren't studying efficiently because these are first year students. They might not be used to the academic style of learning, or it could be in the way that we were teaching the module. So what we tried to do was to consider ways that we could improve the student engagement in this module and also improve the grades as well. So what we wanted to try and do was to implement some changes in the teaching style of this module to try and improve student engagement and also the grades as well. So in the case study that I'm going to talk about today, I'm going to tell you what we did and how we changed our teaching style, and then show you the analysis that we did after we had implemented these changes. So way back in 2017-2018, we first heard about McGraw Hill Connect and that it could be linked to the Kortext ebook. So what we did was we introduced this platform into the module in a formative manner. So they started setting questions on McGraw Hill Connect each week that were linked to the Kortext book. So each week we would set questions based on a different body area, so the nervous system, for example. We would then link this to some reading from the Kortext ebook. So, for example, we've got the peripheral nervous system questions and the reading that's related to that. We also set some adaptive learning questions. So I think that Joan was talking about this earlier. So questions where the student could actually select how confident they were that they knew the answer to the question. And the feedback that we got from the students is that they really liked being able to assess themselves what they knew and what they didn't know. So as I said, these were formative assignments. What we found, though, was that it didn't really make much of a difference in the student engagement or the grades at the end of the module. So what we wanted to try and do is to find a way that we could make sure that the students were actually doing the assignments and doing the reading that we gave them. And so what we decided to do is, instead of making these assignments formative, they would make these summative instead. So this is an example of a weekly plan for the human sciences module. What we would do is we'd assign some reading from the Kortext book. We'd also assign some adapted learning questions in McGraw Hill. We would give the students 7 days to complete the reading and these questions. And then when they came to class, they would sit a 15-minute in-class summative test that was based on the content of the reading from the previous 7 days. And what we did throughout the year is we took the grades from the best 3 tests, and these would contribute to 20% of the final module grade. So it wasn't a big percentage of the final module grade, but it was enough incentive for the students to actually do the work. So after the test in class, we would go through the answers, and we would then assign a few in-class exercises for the students to do that would underline the theory that was in the text. Then at the end of that class, we would assign reading from the Kortext and some adaptive learning questions for the next week. So this is just an example of what the students saw. So for example, we would assign them reading. So I would send them an email saying, for next Monday's class, please read chapter 9 from your Kortext book. I would also assign them some adaptive learning questions in the Learn Smart platform. What's quite nice about this platform is you can select the amount of content, the depth of content that students go into, and the average time that you want the students to spend going through these questions. So normally I set around about 30 minutes, so not too laborious, but enough to give students the knowledge that they needed. And what we found was that this is a big improvement from what we saw when the quizzes were only formative though. And then when the students came to class, as I said, first of all, they would have their in-class test. They would then have a series of assignments in class which they had to do, which underline the theory. So for example, here we have what's the main function of each of the neuroglial cells. We go through each of the neuroglial cells and discuss the main function of these. And then at the end of that session, I would then set the reading material for the next week, given the section number in the Kortext book. So, similarly to what Joan found, what we actually found was that grades did improve. Interestingly, when we introduced this as a formative activity, we didn't see much of an improvement. So this graph shows the final summative test grade for this module. When we made this summative, however, we saw a marked increase in the final class test grade. So it really did seem to make a difference in the final grade for the students. What I also did is I asked the students for some feedback. So I asked them a couple of different questions. The first was, do you feel that by including a summative in-class test, it helps to motivate you to study more? The majority of students said yes. I created a little word cloud of the kind of answers that I got. So things like motivates, understand, information. These were the main kind of words that jumped out from this word cloud. Another question I asked was about these Learn Smart adaptive learning assignments. So I asked if they found this a useful resource to their studies. So most students said yes. However, another word that did seem to come up quite often was burden. So I do think that perhaps the amount of Learn Smart questions that were being set may have been too much for some of the students, and so we might want to look at reducing that a little bit. I'm just going to pass over to Ivan now. He's going to talk a little bit more about the student feedback and also how we've used the platform on other modules. So Ivan, can I hand over to you?
Hi, can you hear me well? Right, so good afternoon, everyone. I'll just briefly go over the student feedback. So for the student feedback over here that we see on this slide, mainly comes from a different module. Again, it's a biomedical science course, it's on biomolecular science, and it was, we were interested in seeing how the students were seeing the use of McGraw-Hill about, I think it was about middle of the academic year, so about January. So how they were using this platform. And overwhelmingly what we received was a positive feedback from the students who responded. Most of them were quite engaged with the tool in the sense that they found it useful, and they could see if they do something wrong, there was a way of repeating back the same questions so they can consolidate the knowledge in the learning, and to how to feel a bit more confident for the upcoming summative assignments, such as the summative test that I believe they had around the time. And it's they found it as a very useful tool essentially to practice for those summative assignments that they had coming up. Across the other modules, we, as it was mentioned earlier on, we have the Kortext ebooks that are pretty much a staple for all our modules. And you have also the Connect Smart assignments for a few of our modules across foundation year, for the whole natural sciences department, for biology programs, biochemistry, and biomedical science. And the most common way of how McGraw-Hill was used, aside from the summative approach on human sciences, was to assign these Learn Smart or Smartbook assignments, depending on a module, based on topics or chapters that are usually done weekly. And it's usually after the learning session has happened, where the students would have time to go at home and or just whenever it feels needed for them, they can step in and revise the topic and learn it a little bit in a bit more detail. So this is the most common approach. On foundation year module, where students are pretty much introduced into the academic life, and they're trying to build up foundation of their knowledge. One different approach is the lecturer curated assignments. So instead of using the banks, the lecturer would curate questions based around threshold concepts that are essential for the students to progress. This was especially done, I think, in the foundation year chemistry module, where the module leader would introduce those. In other situations, when these threshold, where you have more students that might be a little bit more engaged and want a little bit more challenge, Connect assignments were given as a further topic practice. So as you can see, you can set the depth. So obviously you can open up a more detailed Learn Smart assignment that would challenge the questions for those students that feel like they have the need to explore the topic in a little bit more detail. And overall, especially for modules where you have a lot of calculations, or chemistry modules where you have drawing molecules, this tool provides the ability to practice this terminology and practice those calculations. So the students can feel a little bit more confident about all these things. The last aspect that we have used is the virtual labs. And this was especially important during the pandemic times when obviously universities were closed. We didn't have access to all these facilities we usually have on campus. So having the virtual labs packages was very useful to introduce these key lab skills for the students without them feeling that they've missed out on not having lab classes for that academic year due to the not having the access. So it was a good way of this, of having this confidence for them. So some of the key observed outcomes from our colleagues, the first one is students requested more Connect assignments, and this was especially true around assignment deadlines and exam times. So students would want to prepare better for specific topics, and they were asking, oh, can you release a little bit more around this topic? I want to feel a bit more confident. It was giving them this confidence boost that they needed to perform better on the assignments. Another observed outcome was that having the platform online gives this diversification of the teaching and learning. So it's a different approach. Students during pandemic, especially, mostly had sessions during a Zoom call, which we all know it can get tiring after a certain point. But having opportunities to complete different things such as animations, videos, virtual labs on the Connect platform provided the students this different experience to attack the topic from a different angle and learn it a little bit better. It also gives them this flexibility because you don't have to do it at a specific time. You can do it at your own time when you don't have responsibilities, for example, with childcare or minding a sick relative. So it gives this flexibility for the student. Another thing is that we observed as an outcome is that it's a safe method to learn the lab skills. So as I said, it is useful to learn when you're away from the campus, all those skills. It can be very useful to even post-pandemic, where before coming into lab, it can be daunting to think about, oh, what will I do there? Will I do everything correctly? I don't want to hurt myself. But having a virtual lab done pre-lab session can give this confidence of the student to go in and okay, I know what I need to do now, and I don't have to worry as much, especially during these first few years. So yeah, overall, it's Connect and Kortext have been used consistently by engaged students throughout the whole academic year. But of course, not all students might be engaged throughout the whole time. And we've noticed that usually around summative assignment time, we have a spike use of the Connect platform, which is completely normal. They want to better themselves. So yeah, what we found, it is a great tool to familiarize the student with the terminology and practice all these calculations and different skills that they might need. And it allows them to be flexible about their studies, gives them a little bit more independence to be independent learn in higher education, and gives them more confidence on the subject. So yeah.
Thanks very much, Ivan. I just wanted to finish by making a few acknowledgements, especially to Andrea Valenti, who's been absolutely magnificent in supporting us over the last few years, and as colleagues who I think are maybe left now, Rita, Jackie and Charlotte, and also to Rachel for reaching out to us and inviting us to do this webinar, and also obviously to our colleagues, especially Sandra, who we work closely with, and Neville, who developed the platform with, and also McGraw, who actually leads in human sciences now, and our head of department, Alan Page, who agreed for us to take the platform on in the first place.
Thank you so much. I think it was really a number of takeaways from that session, but the comments around incentivization, getting that right, I think was really interesting to see the impact that had. You know, the move from the formative to summative assessment was also very interesting to see, again, the feedback. But one thing I wanted to just quickly touch on was like that it all basically starts with getting people to read, which we talked about starts within the platforms within Kortext. And our tools nicely seamlessly integrate into the LMS, which makes it easy for others to access it and prepare, understand. And McGraw Hill's content, as we talked through, really seems to be helping apply and assess where the students are at to make sure that they're successful and they understand what they're meant to be mastering on each of the different courses. All right, well, if you don't mind, we're going to go into a couple of questions that we've received from the group beforehand. So why don't I start out with the first one? How did you get started? How did you get your students started with engaging with the reading and teaching and learning solutions? And shall we start with Dr. Roberts?
Sure, yeah. So what we found is that it does take a good few weeks of sort of onboarding the students onto the platform, getting used to the assignments, doing the reading. So normally what we do is for at least a few weeks, we will have seminars where we work through the platform with the students. We will go through assignments together. We will maybe read a section together and then answer some questions together so that they feel confident that they can then do it in their own time as well. I would say that does definitely take a good few weeks, and normally we don't include maybe the first 2 or 3 weeks as summative assignments that will contribute towards their final grade because they're still getting used to the platform. I'm not sure if that answers the question.
Yeah, it does. Dr. Liu?
Yeah, for us, we actually have our Blackbook module site opened at least 1 or 2 weeks before the start of the module or the semester. And on that Blackbook site, there's links to Connect assignment. And actually students start creating Connect account and doing reading assignment even before the semester starts. So we have about 60 to 70% of students on our cohort actually registering onto Connect, doing reading assignment, and just some introduction kind of videos, watching those, how to access the ebook in Connect, how to access the API in Connect. That's all done even before the semester starts. So we have some very eager, motivated students. They know they're doing university studies. It's going to be hard, and they do the work from the very start before all the coursework comes in. So student will engage with the work and technology if it's available.
And what would you say was one of your biggest surprises or learnings that you wish you would have known before starting to use some of these teaching learning resources like Connect?
For me, I really think it's the question banks. I really just thought that the human anatomy by Ken Sullivan, it's just an ebook, just what you'll get from the reading list, and you can click into that list and then access book as a library resource. I didn't actually know that there were other digital education tools that's associated with it with no additional cost to the book. And actually digging a little bit deeper, seeing what those tools are like, how easy it is to use, and overall how user-friendly the tools are, and how informative they are. So yeah, excellent all around. Thanks.
Yeah, I have to agree with Joan there, and especially things like the virtual labs, for example, have been really fantastic for us over the last few years, and we do plan to continue using them even though we're going back on campus now. As Ivan was saying, what we plan to do is set these virtual labs as practice for the students before they actually come into campus to do the wet labs, and so they've been fantastic.
Okay. And just pulling from the Kortext wonky research that's done recently, it says 6 in 10 academic respondents to the survey anticipate significant new changes to teaching within institutions, with further quarter expecting the acceleration of existing plans for change. Have you seen this in your university? And if so, in what ways? wants to go first?
Yeah. I mean, with our university, we understand that the digital world is very important for our students. They have at least 2 years of online learning. And how do we still make learning interesting for the student, motivating? We need to, update our digital education resource and incorporate it in various teaching sessions. So it can't be an hour-long lecture. The students can't stay motivated and focused that long and just listen to your talk. So you have to break it with some interactive activities somehow. And how do we get these intellectual activities? So the tools that's used in McGraw Hills are very good for that. Obviously, there's also other ones as well that we can incorporate. But yes, I think it's very important to embed digital technology into teaching, definitely.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. There's other tools, like Joan was talking about the anatomy of videos and students being able to see things in 3D. It really revolutionizes things where students don't have to just look at a textbook, but you have a real life model of things. Also videos, for example, that students can watch and then answer questions on. So all these things are really, really visual, and I think the students really appreciate that. Instead of just being talked at for an hour, they have all these different interactive activities that they can get stuck into. So I think that really is the future.
I think that the key that continues changing, because the attention span of students has drastically been changing over the years. I think we had an editorial advisory board recently that talked about how the attention span of a student is between 2 and 3 minutes at a time now, which is actually creating a significant challenge of doing more critical evaluation types of activities and reading in general and focusing and really understanding and evaluating what they're reading. So I think having a change of mode and changing tactics and providing different resources is essential to kind of keeping them engaged. All right, one last question before we wrap up. What are your next steps and what do you plan to evolve with your course now and moving forward?
I mean, for us, as I was saying, we really want to continue using the platform, but to really integrate it with on-campus teaching as much as possible. So having these virtual labs that the students do before coming onto campus, but also we've been in discussions with McGraw Hill about developing some new virtual labs that will complement our other practical sessions that aren't already available. So that students will be confident when they come to campus that they already have an idea of what they're doing, whether that's PET skills or doing gel electrophoresis. So that's something that that we feel strongly that we'd like to develop.
Yeah, totally agree with Helen. I think it's really important to start customizing, making some of the tutorial assignments very useful for your module and make it more focused for your module. Choosing questions from question banks are fantastic, but some of the questions that you want to ask are actually not there. So the ability to actually create your own question, your own worksheet, and so that students are able to focus on the main core of your tutorial. I think that's very important. And that's what we'll be looking forward to do a little bit more with McGraw Hill tools. And obviously we've used McGraw Hill tools for about 3 years now, and there's still so much we haven't actually touched upon. So we still need to dig a little bit deeper to find, the right animation, the right kind of images to further help the students with their learning, to just really consolidate that understanding, of what we've taught in lectures and tutorials, and really encourage them to actually explore more, to do a little bit more of independent study and research, not just, what is taught and you just learn that, but also be fascinated about the anatomy as a whole. And I think that's what we need to do in the next steps. Thanks.
Wonderful, thank you. I'm just going to quickly share my screen one more time so we can wrap up. We just wanted to quickly talk through kind of what the next steps are if you're interested in moving forward and exploring further solutions like this. As we said, it starts with the reading within Kortext and then driving that engagement and digging a little bit deeper into further resources that we can supply and work with you in developing within McGraw Hill. It's a fairly simple process. We work together to understand a bit more about your goals, your challenges, the different stakeholders and timelines you're working towards. We work with you to pick the content to make sure that you have the right content, resources, tools to facilitate the type of module you're looking to work with. We help you put it together, which I think is important when you're making a transition into using new tools and resources. We provide you with the support, the training, the implementation. I think as you saw from Dr. Liu and Dr. Roberts, we have that support there, and we want to make sure that you are successful. And again, the last point, ensuring success is important for us. It's not just about getting you set up, but it's about working with you along that journey, because we've been working in partnership with Middlesex and with Westminster for a number of years, and we're just starting that kind of journey with them, and we see it evolving over the next couple of years. I just wanted to also take the time to thank everybody for today, for the speakers today, Dr. Liu, Dr. Roberts, and Yvonne, as well as Robin Gibson for co-hosting this event with us today, Kortext. It's been a pleasure, and if you guys have any further questions or want to learn more about what we talked about today, we're happy to set up further sessions with you. Otherwise, I want to thank you all for joining us and have a fantastic day. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.